Okay, today we are starting a new chapter. This is chapter 3, I think, in your book, which is the chemistry of soil organic matter. You can finish up reading the rest of the other chapter, the inorganic component of soil. Soil organic matter, SOM, first letter soil organic matter, the first letter of each of the words, plays a significant role in affecting the chemistry of soil. It's extremely important for the chemistry of soils. The structure and chemistry of soil organic matter are still not well understood. As much as the soil scientists have studied and done a lot of research on the organic matter in soil, still there are some aspects until today that are not really very well understood. It's variable and has close relationship with clay minerals and metal oxides. It's variable, that means it's not all the same. When we say organic matter in soil, it doesn't mean it's always the same thing, the exact same thing, wherever you go. And has very close relationship with clay minerals and metal oxides, with the inorganic part of the soil. Close relation, they are almost always together in the same soil, in contact, in close relationship. The chemistry and reactions it undergoes with metals and organic chemicals are complex. They are not easy. They're very complicated. So it interacts, it has lots of reactions with the metals and with the organic chemicals that are added to the soil. We need to know soil organic matter content and function in soils and its composition, fractionation, structure, and intimate association with inorganic soil components. Intimate, very close. When you say there are two people who are very intimate, that means they have very close relationship, like they're family members or very close friends. So this is the same thing, intimate association. That means they are always so close to each other, in contact with each other. You cannot separate them from each other. We need to know also environmentally important reactions between soil organic matter and metals and organic contaminants. That's something that also we will discuss a little bit in the chapter. There are common definitions and terminologies. If you look in your textbook table 3.1, page 76, in your textbook, read those. We will cover some of those, but they are discussed in detail in your book in that table. First, humus and soil organic matter can be thought of as synonyms. I'm sure most of you know the word synonyms. Synonyms means the same exact word. You can use either one for the other. So when you say humus in soil chemistry and soil organic matter, they are the same. We use them for the same meaning. It includes the total organic compounds in soil. So all the organic compounds that are in soil, excluding. So we cannot include the following: undecayed plant and animal tissues. So if you have undecayed, which we will see that they are called residues, if they are undecayed plant and animal tissues, they do not come into humus. They are not part of humus. They are partial decomposition products, or if they are partially decomposed, they have not decomposed all the way to form humus. And the soil biomass, the biomass, the biological, sorry, the biological things that are living in soil also, they are excluded. Organic residues, undecayed plant and animal tissues, like we said a little bit above. So we say that the organic residues are not part of humus or organic matter. Soil biomass, the organic matter present as live microbial tissues. Remember, when you see this live, it can be as a verb, live, to live, and live, if we say live, that means something alive, something living. Humus, which we have already said, this describes soil organic matter. We said these two are synonyms. Humic substances, a series of relatively high molecular weight brown to black colored substances formed by secondary synthesis reactions. So they are formed by secondary synthesis reactions in the soil. They are not the result of just simple decomposition, the end of decomposition. No, they are synthesized, made in the soil for after a long period of time. Okay, we'll talk about very important aspect which is related to soil organic matter, and you should be familiar with that. Now, with the talk so much about the climate change and the importance of the carbon in the soil, this is extremely important. We will talk about it a little bit. Carbon cycling and sequestration. We will see the meaning of this word, sequestration. Atmospheric carbon is increasing. So the carbon is increasing in the atmosphere. How is it increasing in the atmosphere? Of course, as a gas, as CO2. To stabilize future atmospheric carbon concentrations will require an annual reduction in worldwide CO2 emissions. Emissions from the verb emit, to emit into the atmosphere. So these CO2 are put into the atmosphere from different sources. So to stabilize the future atmospheric carbon concentration in the atmosphere as CO2, it requires an annual reduction in the worldwide CO2 emissions. So all the world, not just one country or one group of people, it has to be all over the world to stop this emission of CO2 into the atmosphere. Over the last 150 years, the amount of carbon in the atmosphere from greenhouse gases such as CO2 and CH4 has increased by 30%. That's quite a bit. Of course, we talk about long period of time, but over ages, that's just 1.5 generations in the human life. So 30% increase, that's a very large increase. The increased levels of gases, particularly CO2, are strongly linked to global warming. When you talk about and you hear about the global warming, the warming of the temperature of the earth, this CO2 contributes a lot to that. The increased levels of greenhouse gases, and CO2 is one of them, are largely due to high levels of fossil fuel, oil, coal, combustion, deforestation, wildfires, and cultivation of land. So these are the different things that can produce many of these greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Okay, combustion or high levels of fossil fuels, combustion, so that you have high oil and coal that are taken from the earth, from inside the earth. When you combust these, when they're burned, they produce these gases. Deforestation, the opposite of forestation. Forestation means when you plant the land to become forest. Deforestation, you cut the forests and use it for other purposes, for agriculture or for any other purpose. So that's deforestation. Wildfires, sometimes the wildfires destroy lots of the forests, which also end up into losing these forests that take CO2 from the atmosphere all the time. And cultivation of land. Cultivation means the use for agricultural purposes. If you have land that's not used by man or by human, we say that's virgin land, it's left land. When you start cultivating it, that means you produce crops from it. That's cultivation of land. Also, that is a source of the production of CO2 and destruction of the organic matter that's in the soil. Carbon sequestration is the long-term storage of carbon in oceans, soils, vegetation, especially forests, and geologic formation. So emission is the production of CO2 and losing it to the atmosphere. To reverse that, to bring that CO2 back from the atmosphere back to different places on Earth, this is sequestration. So you hold it back, you bring it back. And Where do you store it? It's either in the oceans, in soils, vegetation, especially forests in the trees, and geologic formations. So soils are extremely important. We will see the importance of soil into this aspect, and that's why we're interested in this, because soils are so important, and we will see their importance in a minute. Okay. General properties of soil organic matter and associated effects in the soil. Study table 3.2 on page 78. So table 3.2, page 78, has lots of these things that I will cover very quickly, but you should be familiar with those. Okay, color. You have already learned that soils that have high organic matter will have darker color, brown to black. That is because the color of the humus is dark brown to black, so it gives the soil that color if its amount is high in the soil. Water retention. The organic matter has very high ability to retain water, to absorb water and hold it. Combination with clay minerals. We said earlier, it has intimate relationship, close relationship with the clay minerals. Chelation, this is, you're supposed to have studied that, or you will study it in fertility. Chelation is a process where some organic compounds will combine with some heavy metals, and we're interested in agriculture in the trace metals or the micronutrients. So if they are chelated, held in complex form with organic compounds, they become soluble in soil, even though they are very complex combinations with organic compounds, but yet they are available to plants and they are soluble. So that's the importance of chelation. So you can have chelation with natural organic matter. And also there are fertilizers that are sold in chelated form for that purpose, to keep them in soluble form, to keep them in available form for the plants. Solubility in water, of course, organic matter is not soluble in water. If it was soluble in water, we will lose it and there will be no organic matter left. It will leach down, so it is not soluble in water. Buffer action, it gives kind of capacity to the soil to hold nutrients in certain amounts where it will not lose them easy. So it has a buffer, just like when we talk about pH buffer, resistance to change. And this is the buffer action, resistant to change of certain things in the soil. Cation exchange. The organic matter has very high negative charge and very high cation exchange capacity, much higher than even silicate clays. So it adds a lot to the fertility of the soil. Mineralization. When the organic matter is changed from the organic form to the inorganic form, we call that mineralization. So the destruction or decomposition of organic matter is mineralization. So that process will release nutrients also to the soil, and the plants can utilize these nutrients. Combines with organic chemicals. Yes, it has, remember we said earlier in the first slide that it has combination or it has reactions with organic chemicals. These organic chemicals, they can come from what the farmers use for as herbicides, insecticide, or they can be waste coming to the soil from different sources. Okay, the effects of soil formation factors on soil organic matter contents in the soil. You have already covered in the principles of soil science the soil forming factors. There are 5 factors: parent material, climate, vegetation, topography, and time. You already covered those. If the quantity of soil organic matter in a soil depends on the 5 soil forming factors that we talked about. These 5 factors determine the equilibrium level of soil organic matter after a period of time. So these 5 factors determine the equilibrium level of soil organic matter after a period of time. What do we mean by the equilibrium level of soil organic matter in any soil? If we compare, say, arid lands like Jordan with some other places like in the tropics and semi-tropics, if we determine the amount of organic matter in these 2 different locations, in soil, in the 2 different locations, we'll find they have different. Why do we have different amounts of soil organic matter that stays, that's the average, that stays over a long, long period of time if the humans do not interfere in the soil? We talk about natural soils without the interference of the humans. So if we compare them in these 2 different areas, we will find them different. Why? The difference is due to these. And most of the effect is really due to the climate and vegetation. We'll talk about it a little bit more here. Climate is an extremely important factor in controlling soil organic matter contents. It affects the type of plants species. Of course, what are the species? Do we have grasses? Do we have forests? Do we have deserts? It all depends on the climate, how much rainfall there is, and the temperature, the amount of plant material produced. If you have plenty of rain all the time and warm temperature, plants grow all the time, and so that means the plant material which is needed to produce organic matter, it'll be also a lot. And then the degree of microbial activity. To have organic matter produced in the soil, you need plant material. That's the material from it soil organic matter is formed. And how is that? It depends on the amount of rainfall and the temperature of that place, the region we are talking about. But at the same time, you have to have very high activity of microorganisms, because they are the ones that decompose the organic material, the plant material. They are the ones that actually eventually produce the soil organic matter. Without them, there will be residues and they will stay in the soil forever. So the microbes or the microbial activity is extremely important for the destruction, decomposition of the residues, and eventually in the formation of soil organic matter. Vegetation also plays a profound role on soil organic matter contents. Grassland soils are higher soil organic matter than forest soils. So if we take in same general area 2 different regions, one of them covered with grasses. Grasses here we mean permanent grasses, not like the ones that grow in Jordan for a few months and they disappear. That's not grassland. The grassland, land that is covered by permanent grasses. And then if we compare this with forests, most people would think that the forest, huge trees, plenty of leaves falling all the time and everything, they will think that there will be higher soil organic matter in the forest than the grassland. But no, it's the opposite. Grassland soils are higher in soil organic matter. Remember, soil organic matter is the humus, that part which is colloidal that formed and synthesized in the soil, not the residues we see. Now, if you walk in the forest, you will see lots of leaves, lots of branches, these are residues. These are not soil organic matter. We talk about the soil organic matter that's in the soil. When you remove this top part that you walk on top of the land, remove that, and then go to the actual soil, then take samples and determine the organic matter. That's the one we're talking about. And here, because the roots of the grasses are so dense and so much in contact, and they are continuously dying and decomposing in the upper part of the soil, much more than the residues of the forest. That's why it leads to higher soil organic matter in these soils. Okay, we'll talk about now the constituents from the elemental point of view, the composition of soil organic matter as far as the elements that are involved in this material. The main constituents of soil organic matter are carbon, about 52 to 58%, which remember, see that it's not very much change. It's a narrow range, 52 to 58%. Oxygen, 34 to 39%. Hydrogen, 3.3 to 3.4%. Remember, hydrogen, the atomic weight, these are all percentages on weight basis. So the hydrogen atomic weight is 1. Although every carbon is most of the time connected with 4 hydrogen, as you know, so we have a lot more in number. The number of hydrogens a lot more, and yet the percentages is low because the hydrogen has a low atomic weight. And then you have the nitrogen, which is found mostly in proteins and amino acids, 3.7 to 4.1%. These ranges to indicate, remember we said the organic matter is very variable, so it's not the same. We give ranges. That means it's not always the same in any material, no matter where we collect it from. Other prominent elements in soil organic matter are phosphorus and sulfur. The CN ratio is around 10. This is something that you should cover in soil fertility and the addition of manures and organic material to the soil. We cannot cover it here in this course, but you should be familiar with that. Soil organic matter consists of non-humic and humic substances. So, sorry. We divide generally the soil organic matter into 2 major groups, non-humic and humic substances. The non-humic substances have recognizable physical and chemical properties. Non-humic have recognizable physical and chemical properties. That means they are compounds. We know what they are. They are some of the compounds we are familiar with. These compounds are attacked easily by soil microorganisms and persist in the soil only for a brief time. So these type of materials can be decomposed and attacked by the microorganisms very easily and very quickly, and persist in the soil only for a brief time. Persist, stay. They don't stay for a long time in the soil because the microorganisms will attack them, will end up into decomposing this material, so they do not last very long in the soil. Then we have the humic substances. These can be defined as a general category of naturally occurring biogenic heterogeneous organic substances that can generally be characterized as being yellow or black in color, of high molecular weight, and refractory. Now, you don't have to memorize this, but we should understand the meaning of this definition. So the humic substance can be defined as a general category of naturally occurring biogenic. Remember, they're synthesized, and they cannot be synthesized without the presence of the microorganisms. That's why we call biogenic. So they were produced in the soil with the help of the microorganisms that live in the soil. Heterogeneous organic substances, so they're not homogeneous, and we said also they're variable, so they are not the same. If you take humus material from different parts of the soil, from different sections of the soil, you will find that it's not always the same. So it's heterogeneous material that can generally be characterized as being yellow to black in color. So yellowish, brownish, all the way it can be almost black in color, of high molecular weight. So they are complexes or huge molecule, if you want to call them, with very high molecular weight. In your textbook, it talks about them, it shows you the structure. Don't memorize, of course, the structure, but look at it and see how complex it is. And refractory, they stay for a long time. They do not, some of the humus, it can stay in the soil for hundreds of years. They have been some research that was carried out, that has been carried out, and it says that some compounds, some parts of the humus can last for hundreds of years in the soil. Humic substances can be subdivided into humic acid, HA, fulvic acid, and humin. So the non-humic substances, we said these are recognizable physical and chemical properties. We know what they are. They are generally known organic compounds. But the humic substances, we divide them into also subfractions or parts. So the humic acid, fulvic, again, read correctly, write next to you always, like I have told you, put a piece of paper and write down the words. Now, if you say fluvic, put the L before the U, that's wrong. Fulvic acid. And we abbreviate them HA, FA, only after you say it. But if you put FA to somebody who doesn't know about soil chemistry or soil organic matter, he wouldn't understand what you're talking about. So after we write any term, like here we say fulvic acid, then we can say FA. Humic acid, we write now in our slides or in your chapter when you read, they will talk about HA and FA after they have told you what does it mean. And then humin. Okay, some of the most important characteristics of soil organic matter is it contains functional group. Functional group. Some important functional groups of soil organic matter. We have here a table of them with the structure. You have heard a lot of them, and probably all of you have taken organic chemistry. So the carboxyl group, the enol, the phenolic, the quinone, they are in the table. Just look at them, read them, and look at their structure. Alcoholic OH, that means the OH which is in the linear form, like alcohol. You have methyl alcohol, ethyl alcohol, all the different alcohols, and at the end there is an OH. Then the ether, okay, you have the oxygen here between two groups. Ketone, double bonds with the O. Aldehyde, okay, ester. So remember, we divide them also into acidic. So these tend to be acidic to give hydrogen, to give protons. Neutral, that are neither give nor take hydrogen easily. And then the basic groups. The basic groups that produce OH. Most of the time, when you hear basics, they are the amine related, the nitrogen related to nitrogen. So we have amine and amide and some others. Sorry. Functional groups and charge characteristics of soil organic matter. The surface areas and CEC of soil organic matter are higher than those of claymores. Remember, we said earlier that when we talked about the table that contains properties of soil organic matter, it has very high negative charge, very high CEC. And it has also very high surface area, so it can absorb lots of water on its surfaces. So the higher the organic matter, the more soil or moisture the soil can hold. So this is extremely important. Also, the higher available nutrients as exchangeable cations it will have. It has been estimated that up to 80% of the of the cation exchange capacity of soils is due to organic matter. Can you imagine? Although it's in small amounts in the soil, most soils never exceed about 5%. In Jordan, around 1% or less. Very rarely, maybe in areas like Ajloun or some of the forest, you can find soils, limited areas with higher amounts of organic matter. But in general, soils of Jordan is about 1 to 1.5% organic matter. That little amount of soil organic matter can contribute up to about 80% of the CEC of the soil. So that tells you how high their cation exchange capacity. Organic matter is variable charge soil component. Remember when we talked in the last lecture, if you remember, we talked about pH dependent charges or variable charges, and we said that humus is mostly variable charge or pH dependent charge. So now we're repeating the same thing. Organic matter is a variable charge soil component. Its charge depends on the pH of the soil. Soil organic matter is negatively charged at pH values greater than 3. So no agricultural soil will ever have a pH of around 3 or above 3. Most agricultural soils have to have a pH above 6 so that you can produce crops in them. So that means the soil organic matter in all agricultural land will be negative. You don't talk about positively charged organic matter only if the pH is lower than 2, which for soil is nonsense. It doesn't exist. So that's why we say soil organic matter is negatively charged in agricultural soils. The major acidic functional groups are carboxyl, we saw the table, carboxyls, quinones, phenolic OH groups, and enols. I think I will stop here, short lecture, and then next lecture, which I will record for you, maybe tomorrow or the day after, we will finish this chapter. This is a short chapter, so please study and study. And if you have any problems, I have given you the options how to get in touch with me if you have any questions.